Hello and welcome to Real Talk for Women 50 Plus, a virtual retreat to discuss hormone changes from perimenopause to menopause and to activate your fat loss cycle, increase metabolism energy, and take control of your health. I'm your host, Cherie Schwartz, and today we have Jessica Kishbog. Jessica Kishbog is a holistic nutritionist and emotional eating coach with an intuitive eating and self-care approach. Jessica counsels clients to let go of dieting and emotional eating so they can create happier, wholesome, balanced lives and empowers them with confidence to live a life of health, body positivity, and freedom. Jessica's also a mom of 3 young children and a wife. She helps similar busy moms implement family wellness practices and healthy living strategies into their lives. Jessica is a runner and a triathlete, a Disney fan, enjoys the outdoors, and loves to travel. So she is here to talk about overcoming emotional eating and self-sabotaging behaviors. So welcome, Jessica.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here.
I'm so thrilled to have you here. So I always love to start out by talking about how you got to where you are, why you're doing what you're doing, a little bit about your story.
For sure. Yeah, so I've been practicing in this space for almost 5 years after an enormous transition out of law. I was a practicing attorney for about 11 years and became extremely disgruntled and burned out in that process. But my story didn't really start there as far as why I transitioned into this space. I was someone who really struggled with weight and body image for decades, for most of my life. I mean, I remember being bullied in middle school and summer camp, some of which was about weight and belly fat and, things of that nature. And so being so self-conscious and embarrassed and the self-talk that I had about my life and my body, just continued for me for so long. And the pattern of dieting behavior and self-criticism and a lot of guilt and shame and having such a really strong emotional attachment to food was something that I particularly struggled with when it came to some of these experiences, and then stress of law school, like all of these things that I went through, and trying to lose the weight while also dealing with the emotional attachment to food was a struggle for so long. So it wasn't until, probably right before this bigger transition career-wise, I started navigating my own sort of physical and emotional goals and well-being, and had this big personal transformation, which then turned into a professional transformation as well. So sort of the long story short of that was like, I worked on myself mentally and physically, invested in myself to then be able to achieve some of the goals that I had for myself, which was to heal my relationship with food, to lose the weight sustainably, to figure out how to do that in a way that wasn't so punishing and yo-yo dieting behavior, and with all of the self-loathing and the self-criticism, but also found that I was so unhappy in my career that I made a switch. So as I started to then study nutrition and hormone health, and then emotional eating and food psychology, that is the space that I just was drawn to work with women who really struggle in the same respects that I did. And so that's how I sort of became in this space and created a program for women who do struggle with their relationship with food, who struggle with their weight, who struggle with dieting behaviors. But really, most of this program that I have is about mindset and all of the emotional, mental, behavioral feelings and habits that need to change, because they are what's keeping people stuck, so much more than just like what food you're eating, right? So that's sort of where I was and where I am now.
That's an interesting story. As you were telling that, I was thinking about the stress of going through law school, of, working in law, and the emotional eating part, and how that stress and eating relates. Did you, have big issues with that?
I mean, that was probably my biggest emotion that related to the emotional eating that I struggled with, was stress, was definitely stress, overwhelm, anxiety, panic, all of the things. And yeah, it was food and alcohol. And those were the things that were turned to in those times. And of
Sure.
course, as you know, like just with hormonal components, I'm sure like stress is an enormous factor on its own. Without even the emotional eating point, stress is such an enormous factor that contributes to weight gain or just holding on to fat, that I had no idea for years how that was actually affecting me as well, and how it affects my cravings, and how it affects fat storage, and how just that notion alone was such a huge contributor to my bigger struggle.
Right. And with the cortisol, the stress hormone, with the weight gain around the belly area, especially. So, so many women they've tried all these different diets out there. Why aren't the diets working for them?
Such a great question. So I actually run a regular class on this. I run a master class that we really talk about this problem of sort of old way of dieting behaviors versus like what is really sustainable. And I think one of the biggest reasons, it's a physical, but it's also an emotional reason. That sort of old restrictive calories in, calories out, I must count my calories and have them under 1200, or else, right? It causes imbalances in your body, and it really causes cravings. It causes hunger. It drops your blood sugar levels. And that also contributes to the cycle, because then, you're then craving more carbohydrates. And then that's ending up as stored fat around your belly. Without getting into all the science behind it, that's what happens. And so being restrictive in that respect is not allowing your body to trust itself. And then you have the emotional component, because when you set standards for yourself that are not realistic, they're so strict, they're so all or nothing, they're so you're setting yourself up for failure, because you're putting unrealistic standards, you're setting unrealistic standards for yourself to do something that is not going to be, and is not meant to be long term.
And and we were taught growing up, or I was anyway, calories in, calories out. Even my nutrition course in college had that as part of their curriculum. And we know now that that does not work. So I know the purpose.
Because it doesn't consider so many things. It doesn't consider hormones. It doesn't consider any levels of hormones, and that how that can so greatly affect your ability to burn fat versus store fat. It doesn't consider blood sugar levels, and that's a huge contributor. And it doesn't consider emotional state. And when you add that into the factor, there's a hormonal component, but there's also this emotional relationship to food that then causes you to what? Self-sabotage, give up, derail, go on and off the wagon, those sort of things. And that's part of the problem. It's the mindset.
Yeah, and the blood sugar issues that you were talking about, which are going to create the cravings as well. So it's kind of like this vicious cycle, isn't it? So I know the purpose of the work that you do with your clients is to bring more awareness to these emotions that they've been hiding behind their problematic eating behaviors. How do you finally get to the bottom of why they can't stop eating everything and sticking to the nutrition plan or losing weight?
I take a very sort of multi-step approach, because there may be a lot of varied factors there. And so we work on learning what your inner core values are, because that should drive your everyday. Like you should really be living your life in alignment with what is important to you. Once there's a lot of clarity on that, we then work on intuitive eating skills, which will allow women, once we've sort of established a more physical balance through nutrition, we allow these women to be really getting in tune with their own bodies and listening to what their bodies and their mind needs. So maybe it's understanding their hunger levels and their fullness net levels better. Maybe it's discovering how food can be so satiating and satisfying and delicious. Maybe it's making peace with the scale or other ways of measuring success and how we can measure success. And why, and getting to the root of why we may be stuck in those ways, and really digging in and deep, like doing a deep dive on some of their limiting behaviors and the blocks as to why they are getting there, or why they're getting so stuck on maybe the number on the scale. We work on emotional eating skills and uncovering, say, the emotions behind what's driving you to eat. So maybe it is stress. Maybe it's comfort, maybe it's loneliness, maybe it's boredom, maybe it's something else. And really starting to, again, like uncover those emotions, and then really giving yourself a lot of self-compassion along the way. And I offer lots of tools and skills around that. We work on mindful eating skills. So like eating with intention and attention to, and applying a lot of mindfulness around the how you are eating as opposed to what you are eating. A lot of stress alleviation kind of goes in tune with that, because like myself, stress is one of the biggest reasons why I eat emotionally. And so incorporating that as well. And so those are just some of the things that we do to, and then providing those skills and providing the support and the coaching around digging in deep in there. But those are some of the things that we do.
Now you talked about intuitive eating skills. What's an example of an intuitive eating skill?
So let's go back to like that hunger fullness example. I guess
Okay.
one example would be being able at any given moment to kind of stop, be introspective, and sort of consciously think and feel, where am I in this sort of like hunger to fullness scale? And I outline like where we should always kind of fall, and never letting yourself get to one place or the next. And so being able to start to actually feel that and honoring it by eating or stopping eating, right? So allowing yourself to sort of feel that and listen and feel what your body needs, as opposed to like, I don't know, maybe eating every 2 hours because somebody told you to, or eating like, this snack or that snack, like eating because you're not hungry, or eating for like all these other reasons, as opposed to really listening to when your body needs food and when it does not need it anymore, to be able to like push your plate away.
Right. So it's the emotions, sometimes the habits, and sometimes we're told to eat 5-6 times a day. But if we're not hungry, but this is when we eat, but I'm not hungry. So it's really listening to your body as well, right?
100%. That would be
Okay.
that would be like one example of intuitive eating. Yeah.
Okay. Because I know when, women, they're trying to be restrictive, they're trying all these things, and they really beat themselves up sometimes, and they tell themselves the same story over and over again that just doesn't like really serve them. What do you tell them to help them get started on the right path?
So part of it's all mindset. So part of this process is changing the story around dieting, and really, again, getting clear on those values. So like we do a lot of goal setting work, and, one of the core long-term goals needs to be sustainable, optimal weight, right? If that's where their goal is, sustainable, healthy relationship with food. Sustainability is going to be a key factor here, because if you're just looking for a short-term quick fix, then that's where some of those mindset troubles, that's where they run into those particular feelings around falling off the wagon or getting caught up or failing or those sort of things. But if we make the switch that we're no longer on a diet with all these restrictions, and we're learning how to actually live a healthy, optimal life with balance, and also at the same time heal our emotional connection or our emotional relationship with food. So then kind of working on all of those other holistic measures, right? The emotions, the stress, you know, the mindfulness, some of those other components, then you're switching your mindset. Then there's no longer that like, I failed this diet. I'm on a transfers to like, I'm on a journey now. I'm on a journey and I'm making strides and improvements towards my health, towards my life, towards my happiness. And every step I take, they're small baby steps, but they're all improvements. They're all improvements towards my ultimate goals.
Yeah, the small steps, because there is no quick fix. It took a long time to get where you're at. It's going to take a little bit of time to get the transformation that you want. So I'm looking at a self-care routine. What kind of a self-care routine can I implement, especially with that stress, and what would I do?
Oh my God. So that is definitely a loaded question.
I know, I'm sorry.
So no, because there's so many things. Like the way that I look at self-care, and I'll sort of like give you the broader perspective for a second. The crux of what I do, and the name of my program is called the Low Yo Method. Low Yo stands for love yourself. It's the name of my business, Low Yo, love yourself. What does that actually mean? It doesn't mean like, oh, lovey-dovey, you're love yourself. No, like self-care, self-love, love yourself in mind, body, spirit. Be able to care for yourself in the way that you show up for yourself, the way that you talk about yourself, the way that you think about yourself, the food that you put into your mouth, the things that you do, the values that you exude, like literally caring for yourself in all ways, mind, body, soul. That is self-care. That's going to look different from person to person to person. Self-care, like in this sort of very cliche way, is not just like, oh, I need to go get myself a massage or like a manicure. It's so much deeper than that, because it's really caring for yourself. And that's how you can start to let go of things like guilt, because so many women have a lot of guilt when it comes to caring for themselves. They like to put everyone else first. They like to put their kids first. They don't want to invest in themselves. They don't want to invest maybe money or time to their own health because they feel guilty. But if we look at it from the perspective of this broader like notion of caring for yourself in all aspects of your health, it can really help alleviate some of those feelings, those like more negative feelings. And then it's starting to be anything. And then it can be really like making changes to your nutrition. It can be making changes to your movement. It can be improving your sleep. It can be just simply some of those intuitive eating skills, as far as respecting your body, respecting yourself, loving yourself, right? You know, there's so many things that can bring like life and vibrancy and happiness to yourself through that self-care, right? And it just depends on your values, right? So that's also gonna differ from person to person. So what may be so fulfilling to you, right? Like you have all these like amazing women who are part of this conference, this virtual retreat, and Cherie's self-care might be very different from mine, which may be very different from the next ladies along the way, but it's all in the same like kind of broader perspective of like how I love myself and what am I doing to show up for me to make sure that I am living my best life. Makes sense?
It totally does, because that was going to be my next question about the feeling guilty, because we take care of everybody else around us, including our spouses. And it's one of the biggest things that women that are going through perimenopause, menopause, even around that 50-year-old age, they're retiring, they're like, now it's my turn. No, it should be your turn all the way through. But, it's, we have to start putting ourselves, so I'm glad that you really touched on that. It is so important to self-care. And like you said, mine may be different than yours. Yours may be different than the next person. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. It has been great having you. Now, I know that you put together a freebie for the viewers, so the End Emotional Eating Toolkit to share with everyone. Can you tell us a little bit about what your free offer is?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, this is a great tool to uncover cravings. And I say cravings, but that is both from a physical craving standpoint and an emotional craving standpoint. So what does that actually mean? It means, we need to uncover and reclaim control of what those cravings are and then where they're stemming from. And so it navigates sort of how to really get in tune with yourself as far as like, what do I really need? And like what the physical cravings are, what the emotional cravings might be, and then some tips along the way as to what you can do in that respect. So it's a great little tool with a lot of really, really good little tips. And yeah, feel free. You can 100% go grab it. I think I gave you the link. I don't know it off the top of my
No,
head.
I'm gonna put it right below the video for them to download it. So it's gonna be
Awesome.
easy accessibility. So any last piece of advice or an actionable step that you want to leave people with today?
Yes. Aim for completion. Aim for progress, not perfection. And I say this a lot. Women tend to believe that everything needs to be done so perfectly, and we compare and we notice what everyone else does and we critique ourselves, and then we waste so much time and energy trying to be perfect, and often then leads to procrastination, and we fail to then move forward towards our goals. So there is one thing I say all the time, which is take imperfect action. Give yourself permission to aim for, like I said, completion, progress instead of perfection, and do one thing that is in alignment with your goals, in alignment with your values, in alignment with, moving you forward, even if it's so imperfect, right? If one little imperfect action forward is going to be a step in the right direction. So aim for completion, aim for progress, not for perfection.
That is so good. So good. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. For those of you tuning in, make sure to go ahead and click the link below the video to download the free End Emotional Eating Toolkit so you can reclaim control over food, understand emotional cravings, and get out of your own way so you can achieve food freedom you deserve. So be sure to tune back in for the rest of Real Talk for Women 50 Plus virtual retreat. And thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you so much, Cherie.